Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is James Rooke. I am a general manager of Effectv. We are part of Comcast, and our job is to deliver audiences on behalf of the marketers and advertisers that we serve. I have the honor and privilege today of being here with Ali Velshi from MSNBC and really take a look at what we're seeing across the ecosystem, both from the view that Ali has, talking to business leaders of all shapes and sizes, and from my standpoint in terms of what we're seeing in the advertising community. So with that, let's kick right in. I think I'm going to start by asking you kind of big picture question. Based on the business leaders that you are talking to and engaging with every day, what are the major trends that you're seeing emerge since the start of the pandemic?
James, let me start with the broader trends, the business trends, and then I'll talk about what they've told me about marketing and advertising. The broader trends is uncertainty. They don't know when customers come back and how they come back, and when they do, what business looks like and for how long. So it is that dreaded lack of visibility into the future. Now, in some ways, particularly in public companies and large companies, the way that the Fed has responded to the pandemic has been very helpful. So it's kept interest rates low. And for people who are long-term thinkers, and particularly large businesses without serious cash flow problems, there are actually some remarkable opportunities here to position yourself, to expand, to use the low interest money, to gain a greater audience share, and to move on and see this as a significant but a bump in a road. For the smaller businesses I talk to, it's all cash flow related. So the first thing to do, the first order of business for any small business that is worried about cash flow, and think of these from corner stores to restaurants to small and early stage, better capitalized businesses, their first job was to stop cash burn. And in some cases that required laying people off. In other cases, they got PPP loans in which they were able to continue paying staff because that made more sense for them. But the big question that came up is advertising and marketing. Do you, first of all, do you stop the spend completely and wait until you have greater visibility into what's going on? Or two, do you continue some degree of spend and adapt your brand positioning to the world we're in now? And that might mean that your company has a role in it. Your company offers comfort to people in these times. Your company offers a product that will be helpful. Your company is providing experiences for the consumer and for their staff that enhance safety and security, or there's some message of being together. There was a real shift because companies that employed whimsy and humor, some of that had to pare back for a while. For a little while, you saw ads on TV and on the web and in print being very anthem-like. They were "We Are All Together." They had stirring music. But I think we're closer to the end of the uncertainty now, but we will not be there until there is an accepted, widely used therapeutic for coronavirus or a vaccine, which, depending on who you talk to, is sometime toward the end of this year to the middle of 2021. And that's when business returns to normal. And I think we're probably 3 to 6 months away from advertising looking normal. In other words, going back to what your plan was and what your branding was. So I think we're in this really interesting interim period about how do I position myself right now when the world is filled with remarkable uncertainty? What does advertising look like in this world for companies that do have cash flow issues?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think from our standpoint, as we look at during COVID, how the needs of advertisers changed from when the pandemic hit in March through to now, it's been super interesting. And as you know, different categories have had different experiences. So if you're talking about stay-at-home categories, whether that be kind of health and wellness or home improvement or home entertainment, they've actually done very well, and they're kind of leaning more in to take the opportunity to invest, to build their business as kind of attention moves to those needs. But obviously other categories, travel, tourism, restaurants, et cetera, have been severely impacted. And to your earlier point, smaller businesses have been much harder hit than others. And that's the core of our client base. We serve about 20,000 small businesses. And it's been incredibly tough to see what they've been going through as states started to shut down in early Q2. And of course, cash flow and survival of the business is priority number one. Overall, the ad market saw about a 30 or 40% decrease in Q2 in overall spend, which is a dramatic fall off the cliff, with local advertising being hit the hardest for the reasons that are obvious. We are actually seeing now a pretty strong recovery that really comes in line with the return of sports coming back, which, as you know, is such an anchor for brand marketers. And also the combination of that with businesses starting to open up at various phases. But there's still, and you said it, a ton of uncertainty. And there will be as we turn the calendar from 20 to 21.
Let me ask you about this then, because when you talk about the different types of businesses, I also want to talk about I want to ask you about the different types of events, right? This has been a year of event stuff. It's not cyclical. Yeah. It is stuff that's all specific, starting with a very strange presidency and an election. And normally an election year dwarfs everything in terms of advertising trends. In this year, it's different, largely because of a shift to digital. But then we had coronavirus, which was a relatively shared experience by businesses of a type. So every business of a type that had either cash flow or number of people in your store or supply chain issues faced it one way. And as you said, companies that were in-home exercise, entertainment, things like that faced it a different way. Then you had the disappearance of sports. Then you had the social justice movements, which do have an impact because it can make a good advertising campaign seem tone deaf in the middle of protests in the streets that go on for days and days. So again, another question comes up. Do I pull all my advertising? Do I say Black Lives Matter? Do I never say Black Lives Matter? How do I deal with advertising during the political season? So if you are somebody who plans, chooses, buys advertising, and particularly if you're a creative, what a confusing or maybe exciting year it's been so far.
Yeah, you give me stress thinking about laying all those things on top of each other. It's been an incredibly difficult year for everyone for all those reasons, and they have compounded each other. It is difficult, and I think it has accelerated a number of needs that were always there, but COVID has exposed them in a kind of 5 or 6 month period over what would have taken maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And that's potentially, from a business standpoint, a silver lining for the advertising industry, because it's going to move particularly the kind of more traditional media companies where they need to go to be more kind of competitive to meet the needs of today's brand marketers relative to the digital platform companies that are, coming to eat their lunch. And, a few things come to mind. The first one's around, because when you have uncertainty, you need flexibility. And flexibility has been kind of absolutely key. And that matters both for small businesses, but also at the kind of large enterprise, biggest companies in the world. So starting with the big companies, obviously a lot of money in advertising is laid in during an annual upfront commitment. And those upfront commitments are being questioned at the moment because of their relative inflexibility. And so I think the upfront model is always going to remain, because quality premium content is engaging for audiences, and it frankly works in terms of delivering results. One of the challenges, and we should talk about that later, is the need for TV to better prove performance, so it can take the credit that it is due for driving business outcomes relative to kind of lower funnel digital tactics who have the final touch with the consumer, and therefore can take all the credit when they didn't necessarily drive it. That's kind of one thing. So I think you're going to see more flexibility in terms of the commercial commitments that brand marketers are going to ask for, and you're going to see an evolution of the upfront model and potentially more dollars kind of moving into a scatter market. That's kind of one thought.
James, I'd forgotten one other thing that's been happening this year more than any other, and it affects the shift to digital. The pressure on the digital companies, the Facebooks, the social media companies of the world, to handle disinformation and misinformation, and the degree to which some companies staged, I don't know what you want to call them, boycotts or suspensions of their advertising. Now, some of it seemed a little cynical because certain companies stopped advertising for a month in June when they did very little business on those platforms anyway, or they would have done very little. But how does that come into play with companies that are trying to think of a shift from analog or from television to digital? Does this aspect of my ad may show up on some bad page or may be tied to something that I don't want it tied to, or show up next to a white supremacist thing, or whatever the case is, does that figure into the decision making these days? Because for a while it was let's figure out, while digital is cheap, how to get as much of it as possible because it's a little bit hard to monetize. Is that a new thing that companies have to think about?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. Brand safety has always been important, but I think as challenges have been increasingly exposed with a number of the digital platform companies, and we're kind of seeing those conversations play out down in DC at the moment, then I think it is at the forefront of brand marketers' minds more than ever before. It's a huge opportunity for the more kind of traditional media companies in more than one way. So let me kind of give you a few examples. The first is that big brand marketers intuitively understand that television advertising, and by the way, when I say television, people often think traditional television as delivered through your cable box or satellite. I don't mean that. I mean multi-screen TV. So as streaming TV increases, if you're watching an episode of an NBC show on the USA network, whether you're consuming it through a cable box or a satellite box, or you're watching it through the USA app on Roku or your Apple device or Fire TV, or you're watching it through NBC's Peacock service, ad-supported, or Hulu, to the consumer, it doesn't matter. It's just the content that they care about. And so I see the power of multi-screen TV being really important for brand marketers, because ultimately they're just trying to follow their audience. So there's a few things happening. They want to be able to follow their audience wherever that viewing is taking place. Right. And so they're leaning into data, and data, the intersect of data and kind of advertising inventory is crucial. Because previously advertising was bought, and it still is today, but historically more so, where the content, the show, or the network, and the day part is the proxy for the audience. And you're seeing a major shift, in particular during COVID, to more audience-based, i.e., I'm an auto dealer and I want to reach truck intenders. Data, show me where those truck intenders are and deliver them.
And that makes more sense, right? That's just I know it's an evolution. I obviously work for NBC as well, and I'm here as a journalist, not as someone to talk about what NBC is doing. But I know there's been a shift that you're talking about in how to accommodate your client to say, we have 15 ways to get you that audience. It doesn't need to be associated with a show or a television channel. If you want the audience, we've got all sorts of ways to get you to that. It does seem to be more efficient than the old broadcast model.
Yeah, and it's the reality of how consumers think. And so if that is true, which it is, then you're going to see a shift to more audience-based executions across kind of multi-screen TV using data.
There was already structural change in the ad market. Obviously, for the last 15 years, there's been structural change. Now we've got structural change around how we work, how we live, and how we consume, right? That has become that has arrived very quickly. The future, which was 5 years away or 10 years away, is now fully upon us. What remains after that? Once people don't have to work from home, although some people will choose to, in the advertising world, what remains? We know that some of the structural changes companies are undertaking, like cleanliness and staff protection and customer protection and maybe UV lights and sanitizer, we know that'll stay probably forever. But hopefully, what in the advertising industry actually remains if we are not stuck in this weird world where everybody's at home?
Yeah, it's a big question. I'm going to ask the same question to you about kind of broader, kind of what do you think's changed outside of advertising structurally? But I think structurally, what's happened in the last 5 to 6 months is an acceleration in what would have taken 3 to 5 years
Right.
for advertising in a good way. So I think there's a few pivot points that are happening. The first is a pivot from content as the primary purchase kind of mechanism to audience. Number one. Yeah. Number two is a movement from buying traditional linear TV and this digital streaming stuff as an add-on to multi-screen TV just being the standard for the reason I said. So audience against multi-screen TV, that's number two. Number three is for multi-screen TV, a movement away from measurement on old school Nielsen gross rating points to everything moving to an impression model. Because if you're not on an impression model, you can't scale being able to plan, deliver, report, and invoice on an audience-based multi-screen execution. You just can't do it. So oxygen level importance and a core enabler is the buy side and the sell side moving to an impression-based model. And I feel confident that will happen, and all sides want that to happen.
And it's
you from your standpoint?
The world's most diverse industry. Work has to be done there at every level in bringing people in, particularly on the creative side, into this industry. This is definitely an area where I've spoken to a lot of people in the industry who say, we need this. We need to diversify fast. And they are having to figure out better pipelines in which to get the people to apply. There are all sorts of qualified people, but to get them into the business. The question I have for you, how you navigate this over the course of the next few years, next few months. Let's take the auto dealer as an example. There are buckets of tone as related to brand that are much clearer to me as a consumer than they ever were before, right? So in the wake of the onset of COVID, we saw the various types of advertising. There was business as usual. We're a reliable company. We're a company that keeps our staff safe. We're a company that keeps consumers safe. We'll keep you connected, or we'll let you allow what you're going to do. We're all in this together. We'll get through it together. Inspirational. Social justice. We're going to make the changes necessary, and we're behind you to do that. Or we're really innovative, and we're going to get your mind off of COVID. How do companies who are not at the level that you sometimes deal with, but more at the level that I sometimes deal with, how are they to think about what's the best way to position yourself through this moving world? And I just use COVID, but there's the social justice, there's politics and the election, through all that's happening. How do you navigate a highly politicized world when you're just trying to pay the bills?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question, and I will put my hand up and say I'm not a creative, and so probably not the best person to kind of answer it from that lens. I think the broader comment I'll make is that there is a lot of history around what's happened in downturns and periods of distress about who comes out on top, and fortune favors the brave. And downturns are both an opportunity and a threat. They're an opportunity because the data has proven time and time again, the companies that look at advertising as an investment, not an expense, take share. And so at a kind of macro level, that is true. And you can often, and that's relative to those that pull money out at the expense of their competitors pushing money in. Those that push money in get greater share of voice. And therefore, if you believe that advertising works, and that's why the proof of performance needs to continue to show that, there's a real opportunity there, and also a threat for those that don't. And from your standpoint, how do you see that question?
Well, let me just give you an example of the news, right? I've been in this business for almost 30 years, and it used to be that people would come up to me in the street and say, "Oh, I watch you. I'm always in the gym. You're on TV when I see you. Or I wake up to you every morning." But it was this lighthearted, you're somebody I see all the time. Now it's changed. Now it becomes, thank you for what you do. As Franklin Roosevelt says, we are in the arena now as newscasters. And that's not something we all thought we were going to do. We got into the business to bear witness and to when we could hold power to account. And now it's become this really important thing where you're part of a movement. It doesn't mean that you necessarily subscribe to a particular iteration of a social justice movement or an effort to make America healthy after the coronavirus, but your role is often bigger than you thought it was going to be. Company leaders have been called upon to seize the moment, to rise to the occasion. So a lot of companies say, I wasn't ready for this. I was ready to make a product and ship it out. I was ready to cook food and serve it to people. I wasn't ready for the structural change, the fear, the recession, the social justice movements, this highly politicized environment, this place in which social media is divisive. But I have been very impressed the degree to which companies have risen to the occasion, that the owner or the CEO of a small business has been able to say, this is the reality in which we exist. We will rise to the occasion. We will do the right thing. We will represent ourselves well, and we will present our brands in a way that cause our customers now and in the future to regard us as dealers with integrity. Before all of this, Dick's Sporting Goods, with the decision to not sell guns and ammunition. That was a tough decision. That was really hard. And it absolutely hurt them in the beginning. Nike and Colin Kaepernick. It attracts people who are there to protest, who think that we're censoring and silent, but companies that make the right decision for the long term, whatever that right decision is for them, do well. But as Brian Collins often tells me, no company will succeed in a brand exercise that is not authentic to who they are. So in the end, if you're good people, you might muddle about and make some errors, but you'll get to the right place. If you're not good people, if you can't get your head around the important things of our time, you'll struggle.
Look, I love that sum up, and it touches on a number of things we taught today. You've got to be bold. You've got to be, as you said, authentic, and you have to invest in the long term.
Yes.
Because the example of Dick's Sporting Good or Nike, I think Walmart is another company that's shown kind of great leadership there as well. They are focused on how do they grow their business for the long term and building that long-term loyalty, which kind of goes back and pivoting it to advertising. The analog there is thinking about kind of top and mid-funnel brand advertising relative to, I just want to get the last sale to hit my quarterly number. I think the biggest brands in the world, Adidas is actually doing a really good job here, thinking about how they're allocating their total available spend between those different tactics, where, by the way, it's not an either or. There is a halo effect between them, between kind of top level brand advertising and bottom level funnel digital tactics. But that's kind of out of whack. And look, like in all periods when the pendulums swing, it's those companies that have the characteristics that you talk about are the ones that are going to come out successful. But it's incredibly difficult and scary, particularly for small businesses. Small businesses are just trying to pay the paychecks every week. So it's going to be, it's going to be a tough rest of the year. It's going to be a tough 21 as well. However, what I'm hoping, looking at life with rose-tinted glasses, as I always do, is periods like this drive new innovation, new societal change that put us on a brighter path than we're on before. And that's my hope.
I hear your hope. I agree with you. I think there is hope. It is very, very hard for businesses that are looking at their cash dwindle on a weekly basis to be able to step outside and say, there'll be a bright sun again. And I just hope that as a society and as a government and as a people, we do the right things to extend them the hand, to allow them to live to see another day. Because if we can do that, there will be another day. And the future that was coming toward us can actually be quite bright.
I agree. And listen, your point about business leaders needing to be the ones that kind of lead from the front, the allies and all the above is spot on. And it can't be a flash in the pan. It has to be sustained. And so, Ali, I know we're at time. It's been an absolute honor and privilege to speak with you today. Thank you so much for having the conversation, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
And I'm appreciative of this because I have a lot of conversations with businesses that are sometimes smaller than the ones you talk to, and they'll benefit from some of this wisdom. So thank you, James, and let's talk again soon.
Great. Take care. Thanks, everyone.